They were singing.
My deliverer is coming. My deliverer is standing by. My deliverer is coming. My deliverer is standing by.
Good evening. This is Peter Helen with From Such Withdraw. It was formerly Faith of Our Southern Fathers. Tonight, E. Michael Jones, Dr. E. Michael Jones, will be on. Now, he's a little bit late. He rides his bike here, so it's a little bit snowy. But we're going to be talking on his class, his lecture series that he was going to be offering here in town, but was canceled, so now he's going to have to do it on the TV. And for the next 10 weeks, I think, on Faith of Our Fathers on Monday night at 10 o'clock, he's going to present his lecture series, which is based on his book, The Revolutionary Jew. In fact, I hear that he's coming in here shortly. The theme of his book originates in the Scriptures, and it seems like, if I could interpret what's going on here, is that the church has always taught that that the Jews were responsible for crucifying Christ. Pilate, when Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, this is Matthew 27:24, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Mike, we're already on the air. How was your bike ride? I'm introducing here's my theme that I'm saying that I think that that you're going to be wanting to present on this lecture series.
Right.
What I'm saying here is that the tradition of the church has been basically that the Jews were responsible for the death of Christ. Pilate said, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. But there's been a reversal, and the emphasis has been, well, it was the Romans that were responsible.
Right.
And so the Jews really weren't that responsible. And the old teaching of the church until just recently placed that the Jews were guilty of the crucifixion of Christ. And the church's position was that that attitude has always been in the Jews, and the Christian was to be a little bit leery, or very leery.
Right. Do you have? Can you turn to Thessalonians 2?
Sure.
Yeah. The church, if you're talking about the Catholic Church, the Church's teaching has not changed in this matter in terms of official documents.
Yeah, my position is that the Catholic Church draws a lot of their teaching on the Church Fathers.
Right, and the Scriptures. But the Nostra Aetate says, the exact quote from Nostra Aetate is that not all Jews at the time of Christ were responsible for his death. Well, logically, that means that some Jews at the time of his death were responsible for his death.
Right.
St. Paul says this, I believe, in
1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, first. I think it was 1 Thessalonians. It says, the Jews who both killed
14,
yeah. For you, brethren, became followers of the churches of God, which in Judea are in Christ Jesus. For you also have suffered like things of your own countrymen, even as they have of the Jews, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us, and they please not God and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles that they might be saved, to fill up their sins always, for the wrath is come upon them to the uttermost. And so,
yeah, well, this is, I guess this is a lead into our discussion, because the question is, do we have the right to talk about this? I mean, do we as Christians have the right to open this Bible and discuss these things with each other? Or has that right been abrogated and we have not been told about it? Okay?
Yeah. Well,
do
obviously,
we have the right?
obviously,
or do we not
the
have-
American position is, the current American position is that the gays have a right to be downtown marching, the Ku Klux Klan has a right to be marching, and we also have a right to speak what we think is our view.
Okay, well, if that's the case, and we have a right to read scriptures, you will notice that the issue of the Jews in Scripture is a big issue. As a matter of fact, if you read the New Testament, it is an inescapable issue. The conflict between Christians and Jews is inescapable.
Well, it's near or at the heart of the gospel. The gospel is Christ came and was crucified for our sins. But if you read Stephen when he was martyred, if you read Peter in Acts, they kept saying, "You crucified him," and they're addressing their fellow Jews. He kept saying,
Right.
"You crucified him," but God had ordained that to happen, and he rose on the third day. So the emphasis was the Jews who were Christ's people. I mean, he came unto his own, and his own rejected him.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, Christ came, and the Jews had to make a decision. And some of the Jews accepted him, and some of the Jews rejected him. And the conflict in history has been between these groups ever since. That is the thesis of a book I just wrote. And it also leads me to the topic that I'd like to talk about today, namely the Forever Learning Institute. In the fall, at some point, I was called up by a lady by the name of Joan Loringer, who was the executive director of the Forever Learning Institute. And she asked me if I would be willing to teach a class on publishing. So I said, okay, went and gave the course, talked about publishing. I've been in publishing the magazine for 25 years now. I figured I knew something. So anyway, I suppose the class went well, because afterwards, when I walked out, she came up to me and she said, "Gee, I like that. How would you like to teach a course here?" So I said, okay. And she said, "You can teach on anything you want, anything you want." So I said, well, I just finished this book. And so the stuff is fresh in my mind, so I'd like to teach a course on the revolutionary Jew and his impact on world history. And she said, great. That sounds like a great topic. I'm sure everyone will be interested in this topic. Okay, so that's where we left it. Then she got back to me. She asked me to submit a summary of the course, which I did. Everything was fine. And then on January 18th of this year, which is to say a little over a week ago, I got this letter from Joan. Dear E. Michael Jones, thank you for your generous offer to teach this semester. Our spring semester has over 20 new classes and several new teachers. We are anxious to get underway and have completed the spring course and registration guide this past week. Your course, The Revolutionary Jew, is scheduled to take place on Monday at 9, from 9 to 9:55. And then there's an orientation meeting, which she hopes I will come to, and then she says, thanks again. It is certain that without your efforts, there would be no Forever Learning Institute. I am looking forward to blah, blah, blah. Yours truly, Joan Loringer, Executive Director. Okay, so that sounds to me as if everything's okay. Then, 1 week later, January 25th, I get another letter. Dear Dr. Jones, on behalf of the Forever Learning Institute Board of Directors, I regret to inform you that we must cancel your proposed course for this semester. It is our practice to review the appropriateness of a course on those rare occasions when concern is expressed to us about its content. This is one of those occasions, and unfortunately, we do not feel there is adequate time to perform an appropriate review before classes start on February 12th. Sincerely, Christopher Bowman, President, Forever Learning Institute Board of Directors. Now, wait a minute, Mr. Bowman, you did review the course. I submitted a description of the course to your executive director, and it was approved. So there's a mystery here, isn't there? There's a mystery. We make 180-degree. Here's one letter on the 18th, one letter on the 25th. This one says yes, this one says no. What happened here? Well, what happened is that in between those two letters, the course selection, the course roster of the Forever Learning Institute was published on the last page of the South Bend Tribune in the smallest typeface known to man. It looked like three-point type or something like that. I got out my magnifying glass when I saw it, and there, right under the course on knitting, is my course, The Revolutionary Jew, and what happened. Now, what happened after that? Okay, within minutes
Of that newspaper landing on people's doorsteps?
arriving at the homes of South Bend residents, every rabbi in town, plus the Jewish Federation, called up the Forever Learning Institute and demanded that my course be canceled. Now, how do I know this? Because Joan Loranger called me up that day and told me that's what happened. She told me that was what happened. This is what she said. Every rabbi in town, plus the Jewish Federation, has demanded that your course be canceled. Now, what do you know about the course? How did you know what was going to be in the course? I haven't given it yet. Okay? And then she went on to say, but we're not going to give in. If they don't like it, she said, they can take your course. That's what I've decided. And John, the guy who works with her, agreed with her, and so that's where I left it until I got the letter from the board of directors. So obviously what happened here, now this is conjecture on my part, is the rabbis and the Jewish Federation went over the head of the executive director. They went to the board, and the board caved in. So this is a Catholic operation. It was created by Father Putz, I think I'm correct in saying this, created by Father Putz for older people, mostly Catholics, retired people who have time on their hands now so that they don't go stale intellectually. They can have their own courses. And so it would be Catholics talking to Catholics, but apparently Catholics can't talk to other Catholics unless they get the approval of the rabbis in South Bend, Indiana. Now this is the situation that we have reached here. Now, why is this significant? Who cares? Who cares out there? So what? You know? Who cares that your course got canceled? Well, I think it's significant because it makes a number of things clear. First of all, we are not supposed to know this, okay, that it was the rabbis who did it. That's not in Mr. Bowman's letter. Mr. Bowman says, when concern is expressed to us about its kind. Well, he doesn't say who expressed the concern here. Okay, we're not supposed to know that they did this. Now, why is that significant? Well, because this leads us into a whole realm of discourse. In other words, what we're seeing here is sort of the hidden grammar of public discourse in South Bend, Indiana. But not just South Bend, Indiana. Why is South Bend any different than any place else? What we're seeing is basically the hidden grammar of public discourse. And what does that hidden grammar involve? It means, I think, and I don't think, correct me if I seem to be exaggerating, that the Goyim are not allowed to talk about Jews. Now, we'll go from there. I think that's a pretty strong statement.
But the Goyim, a lot of people don't know what that word means.
The Goyim means people who are not Jews. I think we can make a stronger statement than that. I think that, let's say one that would probably be easier to defend. The Goyim are not allowed to criticize Jews.
Right. In other words, you could talk about Jews as long as it was always in a positive way.
I'm going. That may be the case. I'm going to dispute that. I don't think that the Goyim are allowed to talk about Jews because first of all, what you're saying here when you say that is that there is such a group as Jews, and that is another thing that you're not allowed to say. In other words, if you say that there is a group out there who are known as Jews who act in concert on certain things, you're guilty of anti-Semitism. And this is precisely what we found out with this course. Not only, there are a group of Jews, not all Jews, I'm not claiming it's all Jews, but I'm saying the Jewish leadership in South Bend, Indiana, acted in concert to get this course canceled, prohibiting Catholics from talking to other Catholics about issues of concern that are based in have a scriptural basis.
And for
Okay.
the church fathers, Chrysostom and the church fathers,
Well, you know,
the Jews were a very important part of their doctrine.
Are we allowed to talk about this? And not only that, okay, let's say, are we allowed to talk about, let's say that passage that you just read from Thessalonians. Are we allowed to talk about that, first of all? Are we allowed to come up with our own interpretation of that without checking with the rabbis? And secondly, but more importantly, are we allowed to draw some type of conclusions about our lives from that passage?
Well, when you say, are we allowed, or the wording was, you must stop, that implies that there actually is force behind. In other words, there's a threat. I mean, in other words, there's actually military. I mean,
well, I don't know whether it's military.
Well, we're in Iraq.
Now we're getting into another area. I mean, if you're talking about the Forever Learning Institute, I don't think that the Israelis are going to have an airstrike on the.
No, but it does say must. You must stop. Why this, like, what will happen if you don't?
Well, the threat is always open-ended. We don't know. And that's where either you press on and you find out, or you give up immediately and then you never find out.
But there's a threat involved here.
There is a threat.
Somewhere. Isn't a threat even wrong in itself? Isn't that?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Okay, let me step back from this by analogy. Let's say 60 years ago, you know the Amish, those people that live over there, look like you with the beard, you know. They're all Germans. You knew that.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say 60 years ago that the Amish were making sure that Germany got $80 billion got $1 billion a year. That 80% of our foreign aid went to Germany.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
Right at the height of the.
Okay. Let's assume that the Amish were heavily involved in lobbying Congress to make sure that 80% of our foreign aid went to Germany. And that included in this foreign aid was all of our most sophisticated weapons. All airplanes, submarines, and all that, although it wasn't invented yet, nuclear weapons or bunker buster bombs or whatever you want to call it. Now assume that was the case, and let's assume that no one was allowed to talk about it.
In a free society?
Well, now wait a minute. Where would that lead us? Well, now let's jump ahead a couple decades, and we have exactly the same situation. We have a situation where 80% of our foreign aid money is going to Israel. We have a group known as the Israeli Lobby, or if you want to call it IPAC, ensures that congressmen will be punished if anything jeopardizes this money or this aid. We have America sending its most sophisticated weapons over there, including bunker buster bombs that could be used against Iran. We have a war looming with Iran, in case you haven't noticed from reading the news. We are already bogged down in a disastrous war in Iraq that was largely the doing of a group of people known as the neoconservatives, which was a Jewish-led political movement. Everybody knows this. I can say it, but you can read Murray Friedman's book, The Neoconservative Revolution. He says it. He was a member of the AJC. He says it. He brags about it. He thinks it's a good idea. Okay? This is the situation right now, and we are not allowed to talk about it. Now, how can we live in a free society that is supposedly free society, that is supposed to choose its legislators, who then go on to make laws? How are we supposed to live in this society if we are not allowed to talk about these issues?
Well, isn't there a threat somewhere behind this, hiding somewhere?
Of course there is.
Well, to threaten somebody, isn't that like an assault?
Well, ask Mr. Bowman.
According to the law, somebody to threaten you is an assault.
Well, Mr. Bowman's the one that got threatened, evidently, because he's the one.
Well, then he was assaulted.
I don't know whether he was. I don't know what happened.
If there's a threat of any kind, of any suggestion that behind something is a threat.
Look, all I know is that the power of the rabbis is in direct proportion to the cowardice of the Catholics. And you will increase their power the more you give in to their threats. And so here's a man who gave in to a threat, and so therefore their power has been increased. Okay? Now, what we're talking about here, we're talking about tactics that are not new. Okay? What we're talking about is the culmination of 60 years, 60, 50, what do you want to talk about? One with 45 to 2005, 60 years of refinement of tactics of intimidation. Okay, now, you're going to listen to me. Who cares what Mike Jones thinks about things? Who is he? Okay? All I do is read books. And one of the books I read in this regard is a book by a man named Benjamin Ginsberg, obviously a Jewish fellow. The book is called Fatal Embrace, Jews and the State, published by University of Chicago Press, 1993. Okay, this is not fringy stuff, if you're scared by fringy stuff. And in this book, Mr. Ginsberg goes into the tactics that get used here by Jewish organizations of the type that we're talking about here in town. During this period, and he's referring to the 50s, the American Jewish Committee developed a strategy called dynamic silence to combat the activities of Gerald L.K. Smith. Working together, officials of the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, and the Anti-Defamation League would approach the publishers of major newspapers and owners of radio stations in the city where Smith had scheduled appearances to ask that Smith be given no coverage whatsoever. If newspapers and radio stations failed to cooperate on a voluntary basis, Jewish organizations were usually able to secure their compliance by threatening boycotts by Jewish advertisers. This strategy of dynamic silence was extremely effective in suppressing Smith and other right-wing anti-Semites. Okay? Now, I have a question for you. How do you know that it only got applied to right-wing anti-Semites? Is there a committee out there? Is there some type of open... Now, this is a group of people. This is Benjamin Ginsberg. He's Jewish. He's writing about Jewish organizations. He thinks it's a great idea that what they did. But basically what we're talking about is these Jewish organizations have deliberately strangled any type of free discussion of ideas on anybody that they don't like. Now, they could say that they're anti-Semitic or they're right-wing, but what does that mean? What does that mean? There is, I think, a definition of anti-Semitism, okay, that I personally, I would agree with. I think all men of goodwill would agree with this. An anti-Semite is someone who wishes harm to Jews. An anti-Semite is someone who feels that Jews have some defect of character because of their racial inheritance. I'm saying this because the term was created by a man by the name of Wilhelm Marr in 1870 in Germany. And this was the era, 1870, as you probably know, was the high point of biological thinking. This is the high water mark of Darwinism, and the Germans are infected by this Darwinistic idea. And basically, it's also a time when you saw widespread abandonment of the categories of Christianity.
Bismarck
had just started the Kulturkampf at this time. So what you're talking about is racial thinking. Okay, I agree. It's wrong to say that this man, simply because he's a Jew, is a bad person because he's got bad DNA, and no matter what he does, he can't change it. That is not my position. I have written against that position repeatedly.
Well, okay? It's not true.
It's not true. That's why it's not my position. I cannot accept that position. Okay? In what I'm trying to do here, what I was trying to do here in terms of the book I wrote, was to go back to a more tenable position. It seems to me we have two extremes here. On the one hand, you've got that position. On the other hand, you've got the position which says that anything a Jew doesn't like is anti-Semitism. Well, that's not a tenable position.
Anything a Jew doesn't like?
Yeah. What? I mean, if a Jew doesn't like what someone said,
then
that person is an anti-Semite.
Okay.
And it seems to me in this regard, or let's say, we've already discussed some of these issues, anyone who criticizes Jews is an anti-Semite. Anyone who says that Jews act in concert to achieve certain ends is an anti-Semite. Well, this is clearly, if that is the case, then what possibility is there for discourse? And if that is the case, then we have a whole tradition all the way back to Jesus Christ himself of wicked people who are simply irreformable and deserve to be demonized. And so we've reached an impasse. I mean, you've got millions of Christians in this country who simply cannot give up the Scriptures. No Christian can give up the Scriptures. The Scriptures are full of this type of debate. They are full of descriptions of the conflict between Christians and Jews at that time. And I'm saying, so here I am. Why did I get involved in this project? Because what I saw in the run-up to the war in Iraq was that the country was being commandeered into a war which was not in the interest of the United States by a group of people who were primarily Jewish, namely the neoconservatives. And the more you looked into the neoconservatives, you began to realize, well, they did have a kind of revolutionary pedigree. Who is the father of neoconservatism? It's Irving Kristol. His son is now editor of the Weekly Standard. You see him on TV all the time. Well, what was Irving Kristol during the 30s? He was a Trotskyite. And so what you begin to see here now is certain similarities between the views of Trotsky and the views of the neoconservatives. Well, are we allowed to debate this or not? Is that anti-Semitism to say that Irving Kristol was a Trotskyite? And that had some type of influence on this later movement known as neoconservatism?
Well, if anybody's normal, of course, it's most urgent that it be debated. It's absolutely most urgent, and who would stop the urgency? Who's saying it's not urgent?
Well, we know right now. This is why this is kind of a breakthrough moment. Because instead of all this vague, behind-the-scenes stuff, we looked behind the curtain. And guess who was behind the curtain here in South Bend, Indiana? It was all the rabbis and the Jewish Federation. And they are the ones who want to stop discourse. And the people who, Joan Loranger and the other executive director, stood up to them, and they were overruled. And the board caved in to this pressure.
So how much power do they have? These people seem to have said, we're going to take a strong stand, and all of a sudden they're blown away. So they must have some power.
Well, they went over their heads.
Where do they get their power from?
They're
only 2 or 3%.
They get their power from in this instance, from the cowardice of the people who should have stood up to them. Now, do these people believe? Now, this is what they say. Everyone will say this. Yeah, we believe in the free exchange of ideas. We believe this is a free country. We're fighting for our freedoms, blah, blah, blah. And yet, when it comes down to it, there's no debate here. There's no debate. Now, I got started in this because I was concerned about this drift of our country into deeper and deeper doo-doo in the Middle East. It's been one catastrophe after another. The biggest debacle in American history. You can debate that. Are we allowed to debate this? Okay. Does this make me a bad person? Okay. And then I start to think, well, I'm a Catholic. I should be able to come up with some type of Catholic explanation of what happened here. And that's what led me to do the book.
So in other words, you said there's no sense reinventing the wheel. People have already brought this issue to bear in the past, the church fathers, Chrysostom, and they've already said, here's who a Jew is, here's how a Catholic ought to relate to a Jew.
Well, it's not a new conflict.
No,
and so the question is, well, suppose we go back to Scriptures and we look at the conflict then between the Jews and the Christians at that time. Will that give us some type of elucidation of the mess that we are in today? In other words, will that help us to understand the mess that we are in today and help us to understand a way to get out of that mess?
Right. Obviously, we go back to the Scriptures, but if you're a Catholic, there's probably volumes and volumes of books giving the Catholic position throughout the centuries on this issue.
You're right. It's not just the Scriptures, the Church Fathers. St. John Chrysostom, for example, wrote a very strong treatise called Adversus Judaeos, against the Jews, or against the Judaizers. And he has lots to say about this. So that's sort of led up to the idea. And then you go back there, and then you begin to realize, well, maybe there is the germ of some type of idea here. Because what happened? I mean, I know we've gone over this before. This is no secret. I'm sure that every rabbi in town is going to be watching tonight because they keep
Tomorrow night,
wherever it is, because they keep track of me. They're my most faithful supporters in South Bend, Indiana. I know that what I say will get to the ears of every rabbi in town. Okay? So what are we talking about here? What are we talking about? You go back to this conflict, and there was the conflict. I mean, Jesus Christ came. I've talked about this before. It's not a secret. It's in the magazine. It's an issue of Culture Wars. Jesus Christ came as he promised, as God had promised. And the Jews at this time have to decide, is this man the Messiah or is it not? And this causes all sorts of conflict within the Jewish community. And some of the Jews accept him, and some of the Jews reject him, and you begin to see that there is this conflict that's getting worse and worse.
I think for somebody that's looking in from the outside, and they know the Scriptures, and the Jews did say, his blood be on us and on our children. Well, the Jews that are in town that called in and demanded that you not be able to teach that, what's their relationship to his blood be on us and our children?
Well,
do they claim to be the children?
I'm talking about. Let's go a step before that. I mean, we're at the end of the conflict at that point. It's just about over at that point. Before that, something like the parents of the man born blind are being constantly asked, was your son blind at birth? Because the rabbis are saying he wasn't. It's just a trick. And the parents of the man born blind, after a while, got tired and intimidated, and they said, Scripture, St. John's Gospel says, parents of the man born blind refused to speak out of fear of the Jews, because the Jews threatened to expel from the synagogue anyone who said that Jesus was the Messiah. So fear of the Jews is not something new. Now, we have to understand, what do you mean by fear of the Jews here? The parents of the man born blind were Jews too. But what happens is that as the gospel evolves, as the conflict evolves, what you see is the Jew becomes a term which has a specific meaning. A Jew is a rejecter of Christ. That's what it means by the end of the gospel. And so the culmination of this comes with the confrontation between Christ and the Jews. And the Jews say to Jesus, we have sacred DNA. We are sperma Abraham. And Jesus says, if you were children of God, you would do what I say. But you do not listen to me. And so you're not children of Moses. You're not children of Abraham. Your father is Satan. And at that point, they pick up stones and they're ready to kill him. And that's eventually what happens. But they reach this conflict. Now I gave a talk similar to this in Prague. A Jewish organization there writes big headlines. Jones says Jews are children of Satan. No, wait a minute. This is dishonest. This is dishonest. What you're telling me, and this again is the Jewish organizations and the rabbis, what you're saying is the Goyim cannot even quote Scripture. They cannot quote the New Testament without being demonized by the thought police. Well, I'm sorry. This is intolerable. This is an intolerable situation. And when you get an intolerable situation, there's going to be a reaction at some point or other. And so what I'm trying to do is to let the whole thing down easy by coming up with the Christian alternative, as opposed to uglier alternatives, which we have known in the past. Okay? That's what I'm trying to do. So we have this progression here, okay? The Jews who rejected Jesus as the Messiah become more and more angry to the point where they decide they're going to kill him. And they collaborate with the Roman authorities, and at a certain point he says, are you going to kill your king? And they say, we have no king but Caesar. Well, this is Scripture. This is not just, magazine articles. These are sentences that reverberate throughout history. And then they say, the Pilate's trying to say, well, let's work out a deal here. I'll give you a choice between Barabbas and Jesus Christ. Well, who was Barabbas? Barabbas was a revolutionary.
Said he was a notable prisoner.
He was a revolutionary. He had risen up in rebellion against Rome, and so the Jews chose Barabbas. Well, as I said, these are deep moments in history. This is like the axial moment in human history, where the Jews choose Barabbas, well, what did they do?
In other words, they were backing his cause. We choose him, and we're backing his cause.
It's not like just I choose Pepsi over Coke here. I'm choosing Barabbas over Jesus Christ.
Their missions.
And that's something that you base your life on, this type of thing. And Barabbas is a revolutionary. So what happens here at this crucial moment in history is that the Jews choose this revolutionary. And in choosing a revolutionary, they become revolutionaries. Now, what is the essence of this Jewish revolutionary thought? Annas and Caiaphas stand in front of the cross, and they say to Jesus, if you come down from the cross, we will accept you as the Messiah. And so as a result, they have chosen that they have decided that God has to fit their plans. If you want a Messiah, you better send us the one that we want, not the one that you want. And the one that we want is going to be a powerful political leader who is going to liberate
it's the same one
Jews
that
from
Peter,
the bondage of Rome.
same one that Peter was wanting. In other words, Peter was given the revelation, and then Jesus let him know he was going to go to Jerusalem to be crucified, and Peter tried to stop him, and
Right.
Jesus said, Satan, get behind me. So in other words...
No, nobody, who in his right mind would choose a crucified Messiah?
Peter certainly didn't
Well,
want
no,
it.
I mean, in a sense, you can't. There's no reasonable man would do it. A reason fails at this point. It has to be accepted by faith. And so, in a sense, this is the triumph. So what you have here is a group of people who are reject the Messiah who came, namely Jesus Christ, because he was crucified. Reject the cross. Now, when you reject Jesus, as I said, what are you rejecting? You're rejecting logos. Because that's what St. John says at the beginning of the gospel. Ein arche, ein ha logos. And Jesus said, I am the logos. In the beginning was the word, but it's more than just word. It's reason. It's rationality.
But it doesn't make sense. It's against reason to even accept the cross, and yet the cross is the definition of reason.
It's the essence. So it transcends reason. At certain points, it transcends reason. But what you see here is all of these things have incredible reverberations throughout history. If you reject logos, you become a proponent of the forces of disorder. And the forces of disorder are also known as revolution. And so once again, we're back again to the whole idea of revolution. In rejecting Christ, you chose revolution. Okay? And in choosing revolution, there are going to be severe consequences. But the choice of, can anyone deny that the Jews chose revolution? Heinrich Graetz, the father of Jewish historiography, certainly doesn't deny it. He calls all those people revolutionaries in his History of the Jews. And so what happens is, after within 40 years of the death of Jesus Christ, the Jews got the revolution that they chose. They rose up in rebellion against the Roman authorities.
They were able to finally achieve what they really were doing.
They got what they wanted. And sometimes it's always a dangerous proposition to get what you want, because you have to want the right thing, because otherwise you'll get something that will destroy you. And that is precisely what happened to the Jews. They got what they wanted, and what they wanted destroyed them. Because after trying out a few generals, the Romans finally succeeded in taking back Palestine, one city at a time, until finally the Jewish, they took Jerusalem, and the temple was burnt to the ground. And without the temple, the Jews have no religion anymore. Or they don't have a covenant. They can't fulfill the covenant that they made, because they can't engage in animal sacrifice. And so at this point, we have the creation of the new Jewish religion, the one that exists today, the religion of the rabbis, the religion of the synagogues, where basically there's no temple, there's no sacrifice, there's no priesthood. All we have is a debating society. And the codification of all these debates is known as the Talmud. And the Talmud becomes then the epitome of anti-logos, the epitome of the hatred of logos that results from the rejection of Christ. And so its hatred it manifests itself in a kind of sophistry that you find in the Talmud. It manifests itself, as Graetz says, in delight in cheating people. This is what, again, it's Heinrich Graetz, it's not Mike Jones. History of the Jews talks about the corrupting effect that the Talmud had on Polish Jews. taking delight in cheating people. Now, if you take delight in cheating people, you're not going to make friends with your neighbors. And so there's been one sort of reaction after another. In Poland, it came to the Chmielnicki pogroms in 1648, where the people got tired of being cheated and they rose up, and it wasn't a happy time for the Jews.
But the question is, why would they end up wanting to take delight in cheating people? Is that because of the perverseness of the human heart? Or is it, I mean, that's what people just have a hard time with accepting that. You could tell them this, but they say, well, I don't know if I really believe that. I can't believe they really take delight in cheating people.
I'm quoting Heinrich Graetz here, and that's what he said. Heinrich Graetz was a German Jew who did not particularly like the what we call the Ostjuden, the Jews who were living in Poland at the time, and felt that their moral character had been corrupted by studying the Talmud. That's a simple fact. It's in Heinrich Graetz's History of the Jews. Now, why? Well, because what is Logos? It comes back to Logos. What is the manifestation of Logos in terms of human behavior? It's known as practical, what Immanuel Kant would call practical reason. Practical reason is morality. Morality is reason applied to everyday life. Well, anti-logos will be the opposite of morality. And so one manifestation of the opposite of morality is cheating people.
Yeah, lying. Morality is honesty.
And so on and so forth. And so that's sort of what one of the outcomes of that type of repudiation of logos. So, but the situation continues. It doesn't stop there. I mean, in a sense, what you're seeing now is what you would have gotten at the Forever Learning Institute, because I'm talking about the first. I mean, I would have given it in more detail, but we're talking about what would be the introductory chapter of the course. After the destruction of the temple, we have 60 years later another rebellion.
They try again.
Actually, it started before that. In about 115, there were rebellions all across Egypt and in Crete to the north, in which the Jews rose up and slaughtered the local population. And then there was a reaction. Again, the Jews on Crete slaughtered 100,000 Greeks. This is what the chronicler said. And then the Greeks returned and slaughtered every Jew on the island, and then passed laws saying Jews were not allowed back on Crete, not even if they were shipwrecked off the coast. This is the type of violent reaction that this revolutionary Judaism was causing throughout the classical world. And this time it reached its culmination with a man by the name of Simon Bar Kokhba. Simon Bar Kokhba came out of nowhere. Nobody knows where he came from. Led the Jews in a successful rebellion against Rome once again. Established the Kingdom of Palestine completely independent of Rome. Had coins struck with his image on them, which means that you were the sovereign of the land. And established basically the Jewish, one of many Jewish heavens on earth. Probably one of the first. And then what happened is the same thing that happened before. After trying out a few generals, they finally got one general who knew how to do the job, which was basically you take one city at a time. You got to land people who are cut off from the sea, who every hand that holds the sword can't push the plow, and so as a result, you starve these people into submission. And so one city after another fell until finally they're at Bethar, taking their last stand at Bethar. It looks as if the Romans are ready to give up, but suddenly some traders within the city give them the plans of the tunnels, and the Romans come through the sewer system and emerge, and a huge slaughter of the Jews takes place. And that's the end of that revolutionary period. Now, what I'm saying here, and the thesis of the book, and what would have been the thesis of the course, is that this, as long as the Jews perdure in this rejection of Logos, they are going to be revolutionaries. And what you see is the periodic resurgence of these Jewish this Jewish revolutionary idea throughout history.
But basically, the Jews, like St. Peter, when they went to capture Christ, Peter gets the sword out and cuts off the high priest's servant Malchus's ear. And Jesus said, put it back, whoever lives by the sword will die by the sword.
Right.
I mean, so Peter twice there, trying to stop him from going to Jerusalem, gets into that revolutionary fervor. In other words, the cross is revolutionary in itself.
No, I mean, if you're going to confuse the issue, you can use the word revolutionary in an equivalent type of term.
But it's natural for man to be revolutionary, isn't that? I mean,
if you could say original sin is a kind of natural rebellion because it began with Adam in his rebellion against the order established by God. So there is this natural inclination to revolution. But it's not inevitable because Jesus Christ came and proposed some type of alternative. He proposed logos and orderly society.
But there's two voices, two siren voices appealing to people.
Right.
One
I know. And the point of Peter, a good point to make here, is that Christians are always tempted by this Judaizing heresy. And throughout history, we've had Christian movements in which the Christians have behaved like Jews.
Well, yeah, because Jesus in Gethsemane, he kept telling them, watch and pray, lest you be entered into temptation. Now Peter goes to sleep, and what's the first thing that happens? Well, they come to Jesus, come to get him, and Peter gets out his sword.
You're right. The temptation for Christians is always to grasp at the sword, grasp for the sword, and the sword is in many ways the antithesis of the cross.
Yeah, and then he denied Christ, so it was the denial
right. And what you see here, so to jump ahead a millennium, when the revolution breaks out in Europe at the time of the Hussite rebellion in Prague, in Bohemia, what you see here are priests who are now carrying swords. Huss, the best example of this would be Jan Żelewski, the monk who carries a sword. It's unheard of that a monk should carry a sword. But why does he carry a sword? Well, because he's constantly appealing to these figures from the Old Testament to justify his rebellion against the order, the social order. You're constantly referring to, I'm really Gideon. I'm not a thug. I'm not a bad priest. I'm Gideon. I'm Joshua. And these are the Amalekites, and we're going to smite them, and so on and so forth. And that becomes the rationale. It's the same thing that Peter was. Peter was tempted to pick up the sword, and so there are going to be Christians throughout history who are going to be tempted to pick up the sword.
And all it really manifests is that they probably haven't been living a life of watching and praying.
That's probably exactly true, because what we see in the reformers is the so-called reformers is lives of decadence, oftentimes lives of sexual decadence at this time. And so what they do is they leap into these political movements to distract themselves primarily from their own spiritual shortcomings. And they get swept up in a movement, a large political movement that is going to unite everyone, and suddenly the Hussites are now the chosen people of God. And we are God's holy people. And suddenly you see them as imitation Jews. They're imitating the Jews.
Kind of like America. I mean, it's how our whole revolution.
Well, I mean, it does. So it extends. The crucial middle link between the Hussites and America is, of course, the Puritans in England, and the Puritans were Judaizers. And Judaizing means that you take some type of passage from the Old Testament and use it to justify revolutionary behavior, which is precisely what Cromwell did in justification for the murder of the king.
Right. So
he said he was like Phineas, thrusting the sword the spear through the copulating couple. Well, this is what they do. And this has been a constant throughout history. That Puritan mentality came over to the United States, and it got over here, and there was lots of conflict. And you've talked about the conflicts here, like the Civil War, which was basically the conflict between two groups of English Protestants. Mm-hmm. The Puritans from New England were Judaizers. And they are the ones who led the fight in the Civil War. They were the heart of the abolitionists. And we see it all the way up to the present day. Now, that is the point of what I was trying to talk. I was trying to bring this to bear in much greater detail than I'm going into right now. Bring all of this to bear to this group of people so that we could make some type of intelligent commentary on the politics that is driving this country right now. Because it seems to me this is the best way to approach the issue.
Yeah, you're not going to understand the Iraqi war without bringing some of this information.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying there is this continuity in history where Jews are associated with revolutionary behavior. It goes all the way back to the cross, and to the foot of the cross. It goes back to choosing Barabbas. It goes back to all of these things, and it's remained constant throughout this period. Now, do I expect every rabbi in town to accept this? No. Okay? But who gives them the right to prohibit me from talking to other Catholics about this? Who gives them the right?
Well, at the time of Jesus, I mean, those soldiers were told, hey, don't worry. You guys just say you fell asleep, which is normally punishable by death. We'll take care of it. Okay, so the soldiers were willing to say, yeah, we fell asleep, which normally you'd be put to death if they found out. But the Jews had so much power, they said, hey, we'll even cover you for that. Just say they came and stole them. So apparently, it's indicating that the Jewish leaders, and you would suppose even today, have one of their ambitions is to get power with control over those in power.
That's the thesis. Well, I mean, Ginsburg's book says that the Jews have always gravitated toward positions of power, but he says it's called fatal embrace because oftentimes the very princes they empower, they turn on.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I guess the classic instance of this would be Stalin in the Soviet Union. No one served Stalin more faithfully than the Jews. And then Stalin turned on the Jews.
Well, the Jews helped create Stalin, right?
Bolshevism was like neoconservatism. It was a Jewish movement. It could not. Bolshevism was one small part of the revolutionary movement in Russia during the 19th century, and the revolutionary movement in Russia could not have succeeded without Jewish support. After, for example, just to give you one example, after the assassination of the Tsar Alexander II, there was a crackdown.
That was what,
1880.
Okay.
And there was a crackdown, and the Jews left places like Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they went back down to Odessa, along the Pale of the settlement, where they were beyond the reach of the Tsar's police. They just retreated into the shtetl, and they couldn't. And this is where the movement rejuvenated itself, and it came back, and it eventuated in the revolution of 1917, when the Bolsheviks took power. It could not have succeeded without Jewish participation.
Just a thought, which hopefully it fits in. Paul Fisher always said the Masons were Kabbalistic Gnostics. Is there a connection between the Jews being revolutionary and the Masons being revolutionary?
Yeah, I have the whole middle section of the book goes from Protestantism as the vehicle of revolution to Freemasonry as the vehicle for revolution. And the crucial change took place at around 1660, at the time of the Reformation in England. By that point, every Englishman was sick to death of some wacko standing up saying, I am Gideon, and I have the sword, and you follow me. There were so many of these groups, like the Diggers, and the Ranters, and the Quakers, that the Englishmen got sick of them, and so they didn't want any more, and their king was restored, and a new form of revolutionary activity arose, and it was known as Freemasonry, which was based on Kabbalah. And there's a whole complicated history that goes all the way back to Reuchlin, and the Neoplatonists in Italy. Reuchlin brings Jewish Kabbalah into the Christian world. Agrippa, his student, takes it forward, and then John Dee takes it to England, and it becomes the basis of Elizabethan England. Kabbalah, and that eventually leads to Freemasonry. That's another whole topic that we would have covered in this thing.
In that class.
Yeah.
Now, the Talmud and the Kabbalah, are they related then?
Well, Kabbalah is a particular group of books. Kabbalah is not as old as the Talmud. The Talmud was codified in Babylon in around the 6th, 7th century. Kabbalah, the Zohar, didn't come into existence until the time of the Albigensian Crusade, which is to say the 13th century in France. Albigensianism and Kabbalah sort of came into existence around the same time. The culmination of Kabbalistic thinking was the Jewish Messiah, one more Jewish Messiah, false Messiah, namely Shabbatai Zevi, was deeply influenced by Kabbalah. Heinrich Graetz does not like Kabbalah. He calls the Zohar that lying book. So there's all this sort of debate the effect, the bad effect of Kabbalah on the Jews at that time.
But the Jews today generally are not into the Kabbalah as much.
Well, there's
They're
certainly
into
some,
but the
some
Talmud
are.
is mainly
Well,
there.
the Talmud has a different kind of status. The Talmud is the heart of the Jewish people. That's what it says in the Jewish Encyclopedia. And what you have in the Talmud is this essence, this kind of distillation of anti-logos. And that is going to have consequences. And what we're doing now is living through the consequences. But what I'm saying here is, if we live in a world where, okay, no one now is exempt from the charge of anti-Semitism. Jimmy Carter has written a book about Israel. He is now considered an anti-Semite. Just yesterday, there was a professor from Indiana University, Bloomington, who has reported in the New York Times, has written an article for the American Jewish Congress criticizing Jewish anti-Semites. In other words, any Jew, it was in the New York Times yesterday, okay, any Jew who criticizes, he's saying Israel, but what we're talking about, if a Jew criticizes the party line, he's an anti-Semite. Now, what we're seeing here is this sort of thought control process of demonizing anybody who disagrees. This process is now run amok. And we are in this mess in foreign policy because this policy has been in effect for a long time. And we have been prohibited from discussing the things that we are discussing here today. And when you're prohibited from doing it, you cannot make intelligent decisions of the sort that voters in this country are supposed to make.
But the reason that what you're saying is important is because without some reasoned dialogue here, history says there'll be a backlash.
There will be a backlash. This is what Ginsburg says. This is the whole hidden history of fatal embrace. That at a certain point, everything goes too far. I think we've reached the point where it's gone too far. And then there's a backlash, and lots of people get hurt. So if you're going to stifle rational debate, you're going to promote this type of pressure which will explode at a certain point.
Like it did with the Germans.
As it did in Germany during the 20s and the 30s. All throughout Eastern Europe, there was a backlash to the excesses of Bolshevism. Bolshevism was perceived as a Jewish phenomenon, and that's what caused the reaction. So that was not, I don't recommend that stuff. I am not one of those people. I am talking as a Christian, okay, saying that it's in the Jewish interest to look at the Christian solution to this problem, or at the very least, it's not in the Jewish interest to prohibit Christians from talking about this issue. It's not in your interest.
So you're actually pleading with the rabbis in a sense, saying it's completely in their interest that you have
I'm
this.
willing to talk to the rabbis. I don't engage in character assassination. I engage in open debate. It's the rabbis who went behind my back to the cowards who were on the board of directors of the Forever Learning Institute and made them cave in. That's not the American way. I'm proposing the American way, which is open debate. And I'm still open to open debate. Because I know that the rabbis are watching this program. They watch this program. They keep tabs on me. I know that for a fact.
But like Jesus came, he just, I didn't come to bring peace but division, but he came in the mode of a peacemaker, but it still caused division.
Right. And I guess I'm in the same mold here. We aspire to follow Christ. He's our model, and so we're going to end up in the same type of situation.
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood. I'm trying to clear up the misunderstandings. No hard feelings to the rabbis, but I'm saying this was a mistake. You shouldn't have done this.
For their own safety, because there'll be a backlash.
There will be a backlash, and you shouldn't have done this. And if you're smart, you will engage in the dialogue that I'm proposing.
What are they afraid of? Ultimately, what is their worst fear?
I think what you should do is ask the rabbi. Get one of the rabbis to sit in my seat, okay? And you can have him on here, and you can say, why did you have Mike Jones's course canceled? What are you afraid of?
Well, we're living in the days of psychology, so obviously this is a psychological. This raises a question.
Okay, if you want me to be psychologist, I'll put on my psychologist hat. What is the Greek word for fear?
Well,
phobia.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, phobia also means hatred. So hatred and fear are related. And we see this in the gospel because perfect love casts out fear. So hatred is going to foster fear. Now, hatred is a Jewish virtue. That's not my idea. That's in First Things. Rabbi Sokolov said that in First Things. Okay? So hatred and fear are bound up in one concept that's known as phobos. It's the Greek word phobia, and that's what we're talking about. Or if you're talking about the psychological gestalt that we're talking
But it's
about.
amazing that the people that are labeled anti-Semitics are also the ones that are accused of hate crimes.
Well,
They're the ones that have
wait
the
a
phobia.
minute. You can be an anti-Semite. You can hate Jews. I mean, I'm not denying that there are such people out there. I'm just saying, hey, I'm not one of them. And if you use this term promiscuously, the way it's being used, like Tony Jute, is he an anti-Semite? Norman Finkelstein, is he an anti-Semite? Steven Spielberg, he's an anti-Semite too. If you use this term as promiscuously as you're doing, there's going to be a backlash. It's already happening. The New York Times just did an article in which the title of the article is, Does Abe Foxman Have an Anti-Semite Problem? Now, you know, when the New York Times starts to get on Abe Foxman's case, you know that something's out of control. Okay? How many times are you going to scream, Gewalt, Abe? It's like the guy who called Wolf, too many times. We have reached this point, okay, where we need some type of modus vivendi, a way of living together. Okay, and a way out of this vicious cycle of character assassination. This is not going to lead to good for anyone. And I'm saying it's time to get over it. Let's get over the assassination business. Let's get back to being the dialogue that is always being talked about but never really happens.
Right, because unofficially there's been somewhat of a marriage in a practical sense between the Christians and the Jews. And it's like in a normal marriage, there has to be a certain way of functioning. And isn't it in the Catholic position, in the old school, there was a way that Jews and Christians functioned, right? That was harmonious at times.
There was always tension. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There was always tension.
But
I think that the Catholic position, if you articulate the Catholic position, it is traditionally known as sicut Judaeus non. And according to this position, I mean, it's basically a two-part position. It was formulated by Gregory the Great in the 7th century. It is the position of every pope ever since that time, up till Cardinal Chlon's pastoral on morals in Poland in 1936. And basically it's two parts. On the one hand, no one has the right to harm a Jew. On the other hand, the Jews do not have the right to subvert the morals or the faith of the population at large. Now, I mean, this is not, what should I say? This is not exactly chumminess, but it's a formula that will preserve social order. So what you see in our day is basically only focusing on one part. If you say, okay, no one has the right to harm a Jew, end of story. Well, that just leaves the Jews carte blanche to do the type of stuff they're doing. To tyrannize over discourse in South Bend, Indiana, saying, we have veto power over whatever gets said here. Well, that's not going to lead to any type of understanding. We have to oppose that. We have to oppose, as decent people, we have to oppose this outrageous behavior at the time of the war in Lebanon. I've talked on this program about that, where Charles Krauthammer says, hey, we don't have to follow the just war theory. That's a Christian idea. We can kill, we can destroy the entire infrastructure of Lebanon. We don't have to be proportional. Well, no, that's not going to lead anywhere. And if I'm demonized as an anti-Semite, if you're demonized as an anti-Semite for saying that type of thing, well, where's that going to lead? It's going to lead to where we are right now, which is on the brink of nuclear war with Iran. That's the news. That's where we're headed. And now, how do we get there? By this constant demonization of any type of discourse on the role that these people have in our foreign policy.
But if a phobia, this fear and phobia is dominating the neocons and those people, then they're blindly leading us into disaster.
Well, look, the traditional iconography of Jews is blind. Synagogue is blind.
So when Bush takes their advice uncritically, which it seems like he's been doing the last many years, they don't know where they're going.
No, you don't know where you're going. I mean, if you go to the entrance to the cathedral in Strasbourg, there's an image of synagogue, and it's a blindfolded woman standing there. That's the image of the Jew. The Jew is blind. I mean, the traditional reason is, well, Christ came and they didn't see it. So how much, obviously they were blind. But the blindness has other meanings as well. And blindness in this regard means you're rushing headlong into catastrophe.
Like they did the revolution after the 40 years after Christ. They did one, and they did another one,
Then they did another one.
They did three.
Then they did the Khmelnytsky pogroms. Then they followed Shabbatai Zivi, and so on and so forth. I mean, this was, in a sense, what the course was going to be in detail. The entire 2,000-year period of history dealing with this issue, which is basically viewing the Jews from a Catholic perspective. Now, obviously, there's going to be disagreement here. But what are you saying? That the Catholics are not allowed to view the Jews from their own perspective? Are we allowed to read Scripture? I mean, what type of tyranny has been instituted here while we weren't looking?
Well, the rule is you're offending somebody. And if you offend somebody and they complain...
No, you're offending the wrong people. That's what we're saying.
Right.
Because you can offend
all kinds
of people, and it will be defended as art and forthright this and blah blah blah, and so there's always going to be someone justifying. But this is.
But like Jesus said to Paul, you're going up against the pricks, or how is that? When he's on the Damascus Road, he says, "Why are you? You're fighting up against a wall." Okay. In other words, the Jews. Jesus said, if you take up a sword, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. The revolutionary route doesn't work. You got trouble with the Romans? Jesus said, they're forcing you to carry their pack. Go an extra mile then.
I know. This is the Christian response. But we, for various reasons, have internalized the gospel of revolution. And so we don't even recognize it when we see it. We have become by nature rebellious. I mean, if you want to, we could go into other things, but Yuri Schleskind's book, The Jewish Century, says that modernity is Jewish. Well, we've all become moderns, and so to that extent, we've all become Jewish. We have all internalized the categories of the Talmud, and so as a result, we have become alienated from our own tradition. And
the church is not making this separation.
Well, you try. So you go back to the sources and you try and rectify this, and you cause this. All of a sudden, you have this incredible hostility. And you're demonized for what? For what? What am I doing here? I'm writing a book. I'm trying to teach a course. It's based on the Scriptures. I gave this description to the people. They approved it, and suddenly it was vetoed by the rabbis.
But basically, you're being accused of being the troublemaker and the one that's in rebellion.
Well, I guess I am.
But the cross is not a sign of rebellion.
No, it's a sign of submission to a higher power, if you want to put it that way. A superior power that the Christian will triumph through suffering.
Right. The Christian method is Jesus listened to the oppression there. He says, "I'm hearing all this oppression. The Romans. Here's what I'm telling you to do. When they force you to take that pack, go an extra mile. And when they slap you in the face, turn the cheek." Well, they didn't want to hear that.
No, this is not the revolutionary credo. The revolution is always take up the sword. Take up the sword.
Defend your rights.
And it invariably leads to a situation that is worse than the one you started with. I don't know of any revolution that has led to something better. If you know one, you could point it out to me. We could discuss this in the course. You know what I mean?
Well, that was the purpose of the course.
If there were going to be a course, we could have all these people out there and saying, well, I think, what about this? Or what about the American Revolution, for example? We could get into that whole issue.
To make things better.
You know what I mean? We could get it. Was it a revolution? Was it, all this type of stuff is the reason you have a course, as opposed to just having a kind of monologue. But, in a sense, we don't know whether it's over or not. This particular incident. Maybe an opportunity will arise where I could give it in spite of the rabbis. In a sense, all I need is someone to say, okay, I have a group, we'll sponsor your talk. We'll sponsor your series of talks, and we'll hold it at such and such a place. And if that's the case, well, then I'm willing to do it. But the person has to be willing to stand up to the rabbis. Because if you don't, you're just wasting my time and you're just making things worse.
Now, was there any platform for an appeal of this? Normally, you can dialogue. Say, what happened? Can I appeal your decision? was it kind of heavy-handed, or was there any freedom for discussion on the issue, which is what it should be?
It says, the letter from Mr. Bowman says, we can, however, begin the process of reviewing the course for consideration in the fall if you are still interested in teaching a class. Well, why would anything change? I mean, what do you think the rabbis are not going to object? I mean, I perceive this as fairly hollow, because I've already submitted a summary of the course. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to give the course and then you listen to every word and then we'll decide whether you're going to give the course or not? I mean, you know, I've given you a summary today. I gave a summary of this to the lady who approved the course. What more is there? I mean, this strikes me as just hollow.
Well, maybe their argument that the course is just not relevant. We need relevant courses like knitting to deal with the issues of the day.
I don't want to badmouth knitting.
Well, I'm saying,
I'm not going to jump in and say you're not allowed to learn knitting out there. Go ahead, learn knitting. I'm just saying, why can't I be like the knitting course? You know? Don't you think what I have to say is just, let's say, at least as valuable as knowing how to knit?
Well, maybe you came close, but it must have fell a little bit short of the value of knitting.
Far be it from me to badmouth the knitters out there.
Knitting is very therapeutic.
That's right.
So what's the plan? So, and you want to come on TV?
I want to see. No, I just want to see what their. We'll see what their reaction is. There are a number of things avenues I'm going to pursue. I've gotten a lot of calls from people who want to know why the course was canceled. I think, to be honest with you, I've composed a little statement here. I just composed that, stating my case. I think that the forever learning people have done me a disservice. They have treated me badly.
They haven't defended you. I mean, they said we're on your team, and all of a sudden
they asked me. Now, I didn't go to them. They asked me.
Maybe, yeah.
And then they said, "Now tell us what it's going to be." And I fulfilled every single requirement that they came up with. And as of January 18th, I was on board. It was only when the rabbis jumped in and tried to intimidate the board that they changed their mind. So everything was okay until the rabbis came in here. So it's not my fault. It's not my fault. They caved into that pressure. They had accepted the course. It was accepted. So I think they treated me badly. And I think they have an obligation to me at this point, at least to tell the people who signed up for the course the real reason why it was canceled.
Well, the question is, were they acting as good, faithful Catholics by reversing their decision?
Well, why? Explain to me how that's possible.
No, because a good, faithful Catholic would be, John Chrysostom is more of the Eastern Church, but you still had the position of the fathers of the Church is consistent. They wanted this information out.
I think my position is consistent with the Catholic position. I think that everything I've said tonight is consistent. I mean, you can judge what I've said tonight. If there's anything that I said that is not, I'd like to know about it. In a sense, that's why you have a course, so you can have people out there who say, no, well, when you said this, it's not really that way.
Well, that's what most courses are today. Obviously, you don't expect the teacher to say everything that you think is right, or why would you be there?
Well, no, then you have academic freedom. But there is no academic freedom. Academic freedom has become a joke. And so that's why we're talking about the Forever Learning Institute as opposed to, what's St. Mary's College, maybe, or something like that, where you would never get the possibility of even proposing a course.
So a course like this, Notre Dame probably would not have a course like this.
They have. I mean, I've been through this already at Notre Dame. I was asked, once again, I'm asked by a group of students to give a talk. They're doing a lecture series, and they want me to talk on Protestantism. So I said, well, I'd like to give a little bit of a different point of view. I'd like to talk about the Hussites as the beginning of the Protestant Revolution. You don't usually hear about that, but anyway, I think I can make a good case. So they say, fine, okay, you can talk about the Hussites. The day of my talk, I get calls saying, well, we ran out of money and we don't know whether... I said, okay, you can pay me when you can. Okay? Because I think...
I'm sure it wasn't a lot.
Wait a minute, what's the money problem here you come up with? Well, we're having trouble finding a room, and so what you're hearing is lies. Okay, because I know what happened. What happened is exactly what happened here. I even know the name of the rabbi in this instance. It was Elliot Barkey, who was a professor, a Jewish professor at Notre Dame, who was the moderator of this Brownson Club. And he said...
Orestes Bronson?
That's who the club's named after.
Wow.
And Elliot Barkey said, this man is an anti-Semite, and you have to cancel his talk. And the students were caught in a bind, and so they decided not to, because I insisted that I didn't want the money at this point, so I went, and there was Professor Barkey sitting as close to me as you are now, and I gave my talk on the Hussites. Well, after the talk, there was this dead silence. Any questions? No questions. And then finally a little bit of, hesitant and a few questions on the part of the students. At this point, the discussion is over. Professor Barkey grabs the guy who is the moderator of the club, takes him into the room, closes the door behind him, and then chews him out from what I've heard later, chews him out for having me speak. And then he says, and this is what I got later from other sources, there were lots of mistakes in what he said.
Oh,
Now, wait a minute. Isn't this why we have questions? I mean, this guy was sitting 3 feet away from me and asked no questions. Well, it seems to me you had the ideal opportunity.
Well, in court, if you don't object when your time to object is...
once again, I hate to say, but I see a pattern emerging here. The rabbis don't believe in debate. The rabbis believe in blacklisting, and they believe in character assassination, and they believe in intimidation. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to talk to you about it. But that's what I've experienced.
Well, what do you think about even somebody labeling somebody an anti-Semitic? Isn't there some responsibility for accusing somebody of that? I mean, can you just arbitrarily accuse somebody of anti-Semitic, even if it's not true, and then no problem?
And then what would you suggest? What's the recourse that we have?
The Bible,
court of law?
Well, the Bible says if you accuse somebody of something that turns out not to be true, then you are to be punished according to the nature of the accusation. So, what's the worst thing that you can imagine if you say that person's anti-Semitic? Okay, so you conjure up an image of how bad this person probably is. Well, that's supposed to be the judgment put on him then if it's wrong. So the bind he's trying to put you in, the restriction of freedom he's trying to, put upon you, has to come back on him if it's wrong.
Well, what's the mechanism? Or what are we talking about?
Society has to create the balance. Okay, healthy culture.
We live in a society that is completely out of balance.
Well, there's going to be a backlash.
I'm trying to avoid the backlash. That's what I'm trying to diffuse the backlash through rational discourse. That is what I'm trying to do.
But being accused of being...
I am a writer and a man of reason, a man who is devoted to logos, and this is the method that I'm trying methods I'm trying to bring to the table here.
But not everybody that's being accused of being anti-Semitic will have a Christian response.
No, I know.
Okay, and it's not fun being called an anti-Semitic, right? It's not something you just can't wait to have people accuse you of.
No, of course not. Of course not.
And a person that's not a real Christian may respond in quite a revengeful way.
Well, history is full of instances where there has been violent reaction. And as I said, I'm trying to diffuse violent reaction. That is the purpose of teaching courses. That is the purpose of discourse, to bring reason to bear on a problem. Now, if you don't think we have a problem, then I question your judgment. Because the situation is dire. That's how I would describe it. The world situation is dire right now.
No, you just finished, and your book will be published in September. And I think the name of the book is Revolutionary Jew.
No, it's the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit.
Okay, the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit.
Yeah.
It's finally going to be published. You finished the book how long ago? A year ago?
No, about 6 months ago.
Okay, so it will be published in September. And the book, because I was reading Robert Sugenis, the Catholic apologetic, and somebody, I said this on the show, somebody asked him, I want to know about the history of the Jews, and he said, well, the book you ought to read is Dr. E. Michael Jones' book on, I don't know what he said the title was, but apparently...
It's the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. It will be out in October.
Some people think that this is a good book, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, some people, it's changed a lot of people's thinking. As I said, chapters of it have appeared as articles in Culture Wars. So I've been, getting feedback for, 4 years now or so. So yeah, I think it is a good book.
And what is its basic message? In other words, what have some people thought about Jews or the subject? And by reading your book, what's the nature of their change in thinking?
Well, I mean, it attacks the racial attitude, which I would term anti-Semitism. In other words, there's no DNA that we're talking about here that makes you act in a certain way, or there's no sacred DNA. I mean, this is what the Jews said to Jesus. They had sacred DNA.
Well, and the same would go to the blacks. I mean, the history of this country, the blacks were the offspring of Ham. They were locked into a certain, they were definitely going to be this way. I mean, so people do tend to think this way, right?
I know racial thinking is part of American history, and I am not part of that tradition. I disagree with it. I think it's stupid, whether you're talking about blacks or whether you're talking about Jews, or whether you're talking about Aryans or whoever you're talking about. This DNA stuff is not the source of your behavior.
No, because the Christian church has never taken that position.
It has never taken that position. It's in Jesus Christ. When the Jews come to Jesus and they say, we are the seed of Abraham, the implication is, well, we're going to be saved because we have a certain kind of DNA.
We're special.
We're special. We're the chosen people. And Jesus says to them, if you were children of God, you would accept me. Now, a child is different than a chemical. A child is something that thinks and acts. And that's what we're talking about here. You have to behave in a certain way.
Right. Who are my...
And so what I'm saying here is that Jewish identity was fixed not because of some type of DNA. It was fixed in rejection of Christ. And to the extent that Jews perdure in this rejection of Logos, they will have this negative identity.
Right. And you can boil it down. It seems like there's two decisions a person has to make. And one is, of course, whether to receive Christ. But then after you've received Christ and you've received the Christian position, then within that, there's all the Judaizers.
Right.
Within that, there's another decision to make.
Right.
Okay, which Jesus are you going to follow? In a sense, are you going to follow the Barabbas revolutionary, the Judaizing?
Right. And it's as you said, the passage from Scripture where Peter picks up the sword and cuts off the ear of Malchus is an indication of the perennial temptation that Judaizing presents to Christians.
Right. So
the perennial temptation to pick up the sword and engage in revolutionary behavior as the thing that's going to solve all of our problems.
So the main emphasis, once you've become a Christian, the main emphasis is now, here's the essence of Christianity. It's humility. It's turning the cheek. Those kind of teachings.
Patient suffering.
Yeah, that's the essence. I wish to know nothing but Christ and Him crucified. And once you let it lose grip of that, and there's no longer a life of watching and praying, then you're probably going to be swept up in some revolutionary movement.
Yeah. I mean, no one says that every revolutionary is a Jew. It's not true. Or that every Jew is a revolutionary. But that doesn't change the fact that these revolutionary movements have been led by Jews. Bolshevism is one of them. Neoconservatism is another one. I mean, what we're talking about is this historical repetition, this kind of fatal attraction that always ends badly.
But revolutions simply don't work. Isn't that the main? I mean, we think revolutions work because the American Revolution, 4th of July, it was a great success. Isn't that what we always want to think?
Right. The word is used in a very promiscuous fashion, and it's confused a lot of people. But, I mean, revolution in the sense that began in Europe in, let's say, 1410 with the Hussites and proceeded all the way up till 1917 with the Bolsheviks, has led to nothing but sorrow and death. If you have some other view of it, you know, I'd be happy to entertain it, but that's my opinion. I don't see any great progress resulting from these revolutions.
But like my nephew, I was just visiting in Missoula, Montana, on the way to Portland. Now he's he's only 20. He's in graduate classes. He's double major in Spanish and Latin American history. And you know, for a break, he went, or part of his class, he went down to Mexico to study, and he joins up with the Zapatistas. I mean, that's his identity. And,
Yeah.
and of course, he doesn't believe that there should be any authority. I mean, he's a complete anarchist.
Yeah.
But the teachers, I mean, they're just, they love him. You know, so what's going on here? Why do these teachers just love him to take this path? He's an atheist, an anarchist.
Oh, isn't that what education teaches you to do? To reject order and embrace some type of revolutionary ferment? Isn't that what education has become?
The more he takes that revolutionary position, the higher his grades get. I mean, it's just, and they give him authors. I mean, and the teachers themselves, like the teacher he has. I said, well, where's this teacher from that you like so much? A woman teacher. I said, is she married or something? Well, he said, well, she was married. Well, who's she married to, or what? You know, well, she was down in Chile and she met this real wild revolutionary, and they got married. You know, during the Allende days.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course they got divorced, of course, and now she's back up, you know, and propagating her wild stuff. But this is what you're going to find.
Yep, I agree.
And you used to teach, and so you have a
Yeah, but what happens when the institutions of order are taken over by revolutionaries? Then revolution gets taught as the norm, in one form or another. And that's what I'm trying. What I'm trying to do is propose some type of paradigm where we can make sense out of this. This is a long period, and it's confusing. I mean, think of the confusion that we all felt with the abuse of the word conservative. How long has it taken us just to sort that one out? You know? The use of that word.
Yeah, with Edmund Burke, it was not that confusing, right?
Well, I mean, it took on a meaning that was the antithesis of what it meant, and then suddenly there was a battle in the early 90s when Pat Buchanan was demonized. Remember, he was demonized as an anti-Semite. For what? For saying that America should not become involved in these imperial enterprises. Well, he was defeated, and now look what happens. Now we are involved in these imperial enterprises, and it looks like disaster looming on the horizon. Well, this is what happens when this is what happens when you prohibit this type of rational discussion.
Which is what the universities are basically, that's what they're there for, and yet it's not happening.
They're there to prohibit rational discussion under the guise of promoting education. And that's part of the problem here. That's part of the problem we have to face up to. So we got this whole credibility problem that needs to be straightened out, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring order to chaos. Look at the recent history of all of this back and forth, all of these confusing terms, all of these people who thought, well, we thought you believed this, but it turns out that you believe that. A great quote. I mean, I just got done writing a piece on Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, and the change in thinking that Apocalypto shows over the course of Mel Gibson's career. I mean, what is America now? America is this place where doom seems to be approaching. The metaphor for America is this Mayan kingdom of slash-and-burn farmers who have destroyed everything, and everything is going down the drain. There's no crops growing anymore, and so they have to restore fertility by capturing the hunter-gatherers that live in the forest. And then they march them up the pyramid, and they cut their hearts out. Well, this is where, this is one indication of the sense of doom that is in the air.
Overtaking, yeah.
the sense of doom, and you go to the end of the movie. We have the main character, the hunter-gatherer that gets captured, doesn't get his heart cut out, and there's an eclipse of the sun, and the priest manipulates this into some type of sign of approval, and he's set free if he can outrun the spears of the people that are chasing him, and he actually does. He makes it into the forest, and so the last hour of the film is basically Jaguar's paw escaping and killing his pursuers, until finally he's exhausted, and he comes and he staggers onto the beach and can't go any further. There are two guys behind him. They're ready to bash his brains in, and they look up, and there are these Spanish galleons sitting at anchor, and there are two boats being rowed in, and one has a conquistador and the other has a monk, Franciscan monk in it. So what's he saying here? This is in theater. This is called the Deus ex machina. In other words, he gets saved by the Deus, the God of the machine, and the God of the machine is Christ. And so I think that what he's saying here is that this culture, at a certain point, cultures become so corrupted that they can't be reformed.
And Gibson's is basically trying to.
I think that's the point of the movie. I mean, it gets ambivalent, a little bit more ambivalent at the end, but I think that's what he's trying to say here. That this is a culture that has become so corrupt that it can't be reformed from within.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are saying. My cousin's out there in Portland, and he grew up in Madison, and he's very liberal. I mean, ACLU type of lawyer, and but now he's reevaluating things, and he just can't believe how people are in such fear. You know, he grew up no fear at all. I mean, back in the '60s, and he just did anything he wanted. But fear it's being recognized. People are being taken over by fear. Is that part of what he's saying?
Yeah. Well, we have the manipulation of fear. I mean, isn't that what these orange alerts are called?
Yeah, I mean,
a red alert. Is it a red alert or an orange alert? And now what we're hearing, I mean, the message I heard this morning on the radio is that Iran is manipulating the situation in Iraq, and there may be another 9/11 going to happen.
Oh, the jet fuel.
Well, I mean, this is what we're. Wait a minute. Who's trying to scare whom here? I mean, are we getting ready? Are we going through the same old demonization process that we went through with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, to demonize the people so that we will look justified when we do something, when we attack them? Well, either way, it's fear. Either way, you're generating fear. Either fear that the Iranians are going to do something, which I don't believe, or fear that that the United States is going to provoke something, in which case the United States will do something, which I think is at this point more realistic, given our track record in Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction story that we never found. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Either way, it's fear. And so what you see is a culture that is becoming more and more run by fear.
And the only way to overcome fear, at least on one level, is, well, I hate to use the word, but education, but shining light. Because once there's light and there's discussion and there's knowledge, fear tends to have to back off. But that's precisely what they don't want.
No, look at what happened here. I mean, we could have explored this issue in a rational way, but no, that discussion was stopped. Now, what you're seeing here is this locus, as I said before, the Greek word is phobos, and it's hatred and fear. And so what you're seeing is this combination of hatred and fear, the one feeding on the other. You know, and I mean, what's education? I think that love drives out fear, and that's what we have to pursue. And love of what? Well, love of logos, faith in logos. Faith in logos that we, in every sense of the term.
Well, 1 Timothy says that the goal of our instruction or the goal of our education is love from a pure heart, a sincere faith. So obviously love, education, if it's good education, aims toward fulfillment.
Well, no, it aims toward truth. You know, we want to be able to not just know the truth, but to become some type develop skills that will allow us to pursue the truth successfully.
But to walk in the truth and to walk in love are very similar.
Yes. Right.
You're not walking in love.
I mean, we're talking about transcendentals here, and so when you reach the transcendental point, it is the good and the true are the same thing. And the good and the true together, and one burst of insight will be known as beauty. But these are all transcendental goods that we pursue. So, the good in terms of action is, we pursue the good in terms of action by ethics, politics, and economics, practical reason. In terms of truth, we pursue it other ways. But, the goal is the same. So why should we succumb to fear and constantly prohibit, or either fear or hatred? Let's say phobos, because that covers all of our bases here. Why should we succumb to phobos and then short-circuit this project, which is the project of civilized culture? Why should we do this? Well, we do this because, first of all, the people who are perpetrating it are consumed with fear and hatred. And then there are the people who should be defending Logos, who are cowards. And you put those two things together, and you have a period of inexorable cultural decline. And I think that's what we're all experiencing. We've been experiencing this for a long time. Where the people who should be defending the good and the true are too cowardly. And this emboldens the people whose main focus in life is fear and hatred. Fear and hatred. One of the things that I wrote about recently was an 18-year-old high school student in California was given a present by her grandfather. The girl is Jewish, and the grandfather gave her a free trip to an IPAC conference. This reminds me of the jokes about...
Now, tell them what IPAC is.
The American-Israeli Political Action Committee.
Second largest lobby group in the country, next to...
Yeah, and probably the most makes much more effective than the NRA, certainly in terms of foreign policy. Anyway, the free weekend at the IPAC conference reminds me of the stories about Philadelphia. The contest, the first prize was a week in Philadelphia. The second prize was 2 weeks in Philadelphia. But
and the punishment was 3 weeks.
the prize is a weekend at the IPAC conference. Okay, so the girl goes there, obviously full of thinking this is going to be a good thing, and she's appalled. This is an article that was written up in the newspaper in California. She's appalled at what she sees. And what does she see? Constant fear-mongering. This is all you see. Now, this is sort of the psychological dynamics of Jewish organizations like IPAC. In other words, they capitalize on the fear. Constantly, she said they have pictures, for example, big screens all over the place, big TV screens. And the one screen, first it's flashing a picture of Hitler, and then the next second it's flashing a picture of Ahmadinejad from Iran.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's the Hitler of the week. And then the banners will say, "The time is now." Well, this is fear. This is what you're trying to promote fear among this group of people, and you're trying to promote fear because this is a way of controlling people.
Well, how about where the Christians, they believe Christ is going to come back any year, like they've been saying since Azusa Street, since 1906. They tend to be very much into the Israeli camp. Aren't there those fears? Don't fears tend to gravitate to each other?
You would know better than I the fears of the evangelical crowd. I tend to see this as another type of manipulation. One of the chapters in Murray Friedman's book is about Ralph Reed.
Coalition.
Now, Murray Friedman wrote the book. I mentioned already the Neoconservative Revolution. He's worked for the AJC, an apologist for the Jewish organizations. Now, I met Ralph Reed in the early '90s when I was going down to Virginia Beach to Pat Robertson's organization.
Why'd you go down there?
Oh, I was going to collaborate with them on some project or other.
Okay.
But
and Ralph Reed was the president of
At that
Pat
time,
Robertson's Christian Coalition.
At that time, Ralph Reed was president of the Christian Coalition. And at that time, I thought that, he's working for Pat Robertson. I mean, obviously, I knew that there were slightly different organizational structures and so on and so forth, but there was clearly a link between Christian Coalition and Pat Robertson.
Oh, Pat Robertson was the one that created Christian Coalition.
Right, okay, so, and this was the head of it. Well, you read Murray Friedman's book, you get a completely different idea here, because it turns out that Ralph Reed was the protege of Jack Abramoff. Now, Jack Abramoff, in case you forgot, is in prison now. And he went to jail for influence peddling and bribery, I believe, in trying to influence members of Congress. Well, Ralph Reed was working with Jack Abramoff.
So Abramoff was basically a lobbyist?
Yeah.
That went too far.
Yeah, I mean, basically got into all sorts of, paying off for paying off things, giving money that he shouldn't have given money for, stuff like that. Now, that was a revelation to me. And I think it explains suddenly why, for example, why Pat Buchanan's campaign went down the drain in 1996.
Because he didn't back Israel,
Because I was,
what?
well, I mean, obviously Pat Buchanan was the Ahmadinejad of his day. If I don't know, but I imagine at the IPAC convention in 1992, they would have Hitler and then Pat Buchanan pictures alternating instead of Ahmadinejad. But certainly he was not liked by the Amen Corner, as he called it, Israel's Amen Corner over here. But I was there working with these people, and that was the end of Pat Buchanan's presidential bid.
Because he would not go along with the pro-Israel stuff.
No, he was against it. And this was in 1996. It was the South Carolina primary. Ralph Reed threw the Christian Coalition behind Bob Dole, and that was
33-degree Mason.
And that was the end of Pat Buchanan's campaign. So now suddenly, well, wait a minute. Well, if he were working for Pat Robertson, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But now, if he's working for Jack Abramoff and all that, well, now it does make sense.
But Pat Robertson is very pro-Israel.
Right. Right.
Radically so.
Right. But all I'm saying is that the evangelicals are befuddled because they're constantly being subjected to leadership that is really not representing them. That's what I'm saying. If the Christian Coalition is called the Christian Coalition, but it's really not representing the interest of those people.
No, because the people that get in leadership somehow get there not by the representative method or something.
Well, they represent the people who have the money to fund their organization. And so you find that money corrupts all of these operations because you work for the person who gives you the money, not the person that gives you the votes. This is the way the political process works in this country.
And the Jews and money, I mean, that's historically, that's the stereotype. Jews
Well,
and
this
money,
is
right?
now we got into this General Clark, Wesley Clark, just got in trouble.
Again?
This is now, once again, we are dealing with this touchy subject, and General Wesley Clark recently said that there's going to be an Iran because the New York money people want war with Iran. Now, as soon as he said this, Abe Foxman of the ADL said that this was a code word for Jew.
He was defaming the anti-defamation legislation.
Well, and I think now let me get this straight. Now, someone accused him of using this as a code word for Jew. I think Abe Foxman stepped in and said, "No, he's not an anti-Semite, but he shouldn't use terms like this. His father's Jewish."
Wesley Clark's?
Yeah, that's what he said. That's
Dad
what
is
came out.
Jewish?
Yeah, but he shouldn't be using terms like this. Well, if you're a candidate for the presidency, it's your job to go to the money people and get the money. So he should know who these, what they're talking about. But I mean, this is part of the death of discourse, the slow death of discourse that we've been witnessing for quite some time now.
So they'll give the appearance that they're having a good discourse, but, well, I think Martin Luther said it. You're not a Martin Luther fan. But he did say the whole key of the Christian life, if you're on the front lines, is speaking out on those issues where it's crucial. And you can speak out on all kinds of issues, But if it's not the crucial issue, you haven't really said anything.
Right. Right. And so on the crucial, and this is the crucial issue of our day, and you're not allowed to talk about it.
Well, this is where the attack is. I mean, this is where everything is going to fall apart if we don't fix the dam at this point.
Yeah. So I don't know whether we have much control over the course of human events throughout the world. We're small and insignificant people. But it will be interesting to see if there is some type of movement on this front in South Bend, Indiana, because that's all we're talking about here. Why was this discourse prohibited in South Bend, Indiana? And are we going to allow this continuing prohibition of discourse by a very small group of people?
Now, ultimately, you're saying the reason is they got fearful. Okay. Now, you could say, well...
As far as I understand it, the board was intimidated because Joan told me that they were going to stand by me.
In other words, they believed in the truth of your position, and all of a sudden...
I gave her the course description. She read it. She approved it. She sent me the letter saying everything was fine. And then it got vetoed. So we're talking about the board of directors and not the executive director.
But somebody retreated. In other words, they
the board of
got
directors
scared,
retreated.
threw down their weapons, and ran.
Right. The board did.
But if you're a Christian, we stand on the gospel that death has been destroyed. If you read Tertullian said, the healthy Christian, basically martyrdom is kind of like something he looks forward to because he's out of here. Let's get out of here.
Well, no, I'm not looking forward to martyrdom, but I don't have... martyr means witness. So if you're going to be a witness, you're going to have to suffer for your witness. And I don't think anything has changed. Nothing has changed. We're back with the whole story of... This is the interesting thing about how these paradigms perdure over history. It seems that nothing has changed. We're still back in the same situation.
But you were, in other words, the apostles got killed for just simply bearing witness to Christ's death and resurrection. And they preached the gospel, and then 11 of the 12 apostles get killed.
Yeah.
Okay.
All I'm trying to do is say we are in a mess politically, and I'm saying in order to see our way out of it, we should return to the gospel, to the scriptures, and see what they have to say about this issue.
See, the idea is if you just preach the gospel the way they want you to preach it, there'll be no persecution. Okay. But part of the gospel, essentially part of it is, the Bible says the Jews are the enemies of the gospel.
Enemies of mankind.
So that has to be brought out in your full gospel message. But if you do bring that part out and you shed light on that aspect, that's where you'll get.
Yeah, I'm not expecting the Jews to be happy about that. I mean, if I were a Jew, I'd probably grind my teeth too when I hear that. But we live in a country where we're supposed to have the free exercise of religion, and I consider this. This is religion. This is my religion. What I'm talking about here. This is the prohibition of my ability to practice my religion.
Right.
I don't see it any other way. I mean, I don't know how anyone else perceives it, but that's the way I perceive it. I was contracted to give this series of talks by a group of people who share my religious beliefs, and the rabbis came in and intimidated the people and stopped it. I don't think that's not tolerable. That's not American. That's not the American system.
No, because your religion, with the church fathers, they would all agree, especially Chrysostom and name them all, that what you're saying is a very important part of the whole Christian position, the whole gospel. Wouldn't they say that what you're saying?
I don't see how you can read the gospel without having to make some type of judgment about the type of things I'm talking about. And I'm saying that if you want to understand a way out of the mess that we're in, the best place to go is back to scriptures. Is that so hard to understand? That a Christian would say something like this? I mean, what else am I supposed to say? Go to astrology or crystals or race theory or something like that? No, I don't believe in that stuff. But I do believe that the Gospels are relevant. And the key concept that goes from beginning to end is this idea of revolution, this constant temptation to take up the sword as a way of solving problems that that you can't solve that way.
Right, and the constant reminder of St. Peter, because he knew this, was to exactly watch out for those kind of teachers he says, for there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. Then he goes on, he says, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness, and despise government. Presumptuous are they, self-willed, they're not afraid to speak evil dignities. Goes on. But he's saying these false teachers, a characteristic is, well, if you despise government, you're a revolutionary.
I think that's a fair statement. I think that's a fair statement.
A despiser of government and a revolutionary.
The Christians were never told to despise government. They were told to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God. That was Christ's solution to the problem of the Roman Empire. That was not the Jewish solution. The Jewish solution was revolution. And the Jewish solution led to catastrophe for the Jewish people.
Right.
Twice in this period of time. In 70, when the temple was destroyed, and even worse, in 132, when the Simon Bar Kokhba rebellion took place.
And we're getting to the point, even like my cousin out there in Portland, he's about 60 now, and he had a marriage, but he's single and he's got these two boys, and he had this girl who's like 16 now and real pretty, and he's having to deal with. He's raising them by himself, and the girl's there every once in a while, but he said her sense of entitlement is truly amazing. In other words, these kids are like so far off the wall compared to what we were used to. And he was a revolutionary type of guy growing up. But he said,
well, either you get over it or you're destroyed by it. They're the two alternatives when it comes to revolution.
And it's infecting this country. It says in Isaiah chapter 3, a lot of people use this verse today. Sugenis, I think, uses it. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err and destroy the way of thy paths. Well, this is the revolutionary path.
Well, look, just in terms of the current situation, look at the Baker-Hamilton report on Iraq. Well, what were they arguing? They were urging negotiation. Well, we have a completely willful administration now that is, it seems to me, is totally Nietzschean in its orientation toward world politics. In other words, the only way that I think that our president thinks he can fail is if his will does not, if he gives up, if his will is somehow divided. If he gives up and stops willing it, then that was the only possibility for defeat. Well, this is crazy. And you've got people who are former establishment figures like James Baker, who worked for the president's father,
right,
who is like the last attempt of the WASP, what's left of the WASP ruling class, to bring back rationality and debate into our foreign policy, and they're brushed aside. Baker's an anti-Semite. He's an anti-Semite. And they're brushed aside, and what we need is more will and more power.
So we got like almost a John Brown situation where you had the Websters, the Calhouns, and the Clays up till 1850, and they were holding the thing together. And but when they died, it was just insanity after that. Nothing was holding the thing together, and you have this civil war.
Yeah.
If once the men that can actually bring sanity to the table, even though it may not even be the right policies exactly.
Well, this is my hope. This is my hope, that sanity will prevail, that logos will prevail, that reasonable discussion will prevail, now that we have exposed the machinations of the rabbis. The rabbis thrive when they can work behind the scenes and engage in intimidation and character assassination, and I don't think that's the way to proceed, and I'm hoping that they will not have the final word here in South Bend either.
Well, it's kind of like, if we're going to end up with a scripture in Matthew, the last chapter, it says, and when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, Say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this come to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught, and this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. They were working behind the scenes.
Right, to suborn people and get them into lying and denying the truth. And that's not the way to proceed. And that will only lead to something bad. That type of stuff only leads to something bad over the long run. And over the long run, I think that these people made a mistake, because I think over the long run, the truth is going to prevail, because it prevails in the long run.
Well, Jesus said that which is done in secret or behind the, will be shouted from the housetop. So
Well, that's sort of what we're doing right here today. Because it was done in secret, and now we're proclaiming it from the housetops, and we're saying this is not the way to run discourse. This is not a viable option for public discourse.
Right. And so for all of us to walk in the light, all of us are tempted to take the revolutionary route and do things not in the light. And the encouragement is we need to come to Jesus by the grace of God and confess our sins and own up to who we are, and let the light of his countenance, the blood that he shed on the cross, wash away our sins, and let the words of Christ cleanse us and wash us, and we can walk in truth and walk in love. And that's the only way to live. And hopefully this issue that Mike has can be brought to the light even more, and we will hope to continue to do that on this show. Amen.
My deliverer is coming. My deliverer is standing by. He will never break his promise, though the stars should break faith with the sky. My deliverer is coming. My deliverer is standing by. My
under my power. Look into the hypnotic eye. Time now to enter Mr. Lobo's domain. Look out! Open your mind to the possibility that they're not bad movies, just misunderstood. You're not dreaming. You're watching cinema insomnia.
Tonight's feature is brought to you in Puppet-rific, Super Marionation. The management is not responsible for injuries caused by thrown voices, and there may be other strings attached as well. I'm Mr. Lobo. Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, Willie Tyler and Lester, Waylon Flowers and Madam, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Nothing reflects our own inner torment and psychological damage more than the blank, dead eyes of puppets and their puppeteers. And tonight we have a really creepy one. Anthony Hopkins, best known for his role as Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, stars as a ventriloquist who gets caught up in a surreal muppetetoire with Anne Margaret and a dummy that looks disturbingly like Clark Gable, possibly his last role. Cinema Insomnia is proud to present the 1978 chiller, in color no less, entitled Magic. Excuse me. Although Cinema Insomnia is proud to present to you the 1978 chiller Magic, it is unfortunately not the film we bring you tonight. Instead, Child's Play?
No.
Puppet Master?
Nope.
Baby Geniuses?
No.
Devil Doll?
No. Wait. Yeah.
Really? Really? The good one or the remake?
The remake.
Of course. And now, without any further ado, the 1964 black and white classic about a possessed ventriloquist dummy, Devil Doll.
And you sympathize.